Let's just jump right into this explainer, guys, because today we are completely debunking a cultural rule of thumb you have probably heard a million times. We're talking about the widely believed cutoff for happiness. For years, financial gurus, blogs, even just casual conversations at a dinner party have repeated this idea that once you hit a specific income ceiling, well, more money simply won't make you any happier. It's a comforting thought, right? Especially if you're trying to convince yourself that chasing that next big promotion just isn't worth the stress, or that you should just settle right where you are. But as we're going to see today, this idea is actually a massive myth. What if the finish line we've all been chasing is honestly just completely imaginary?
So that mythical number? It's exactly $75,000. For over a decade now, we've been told that earning over this specific amount per year is the absolute finish line for joy. This incredibly persistent idea was largely born from a 2010 study by Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton. And man, their research spread like wildfire. It conveniently fell right in line with classic tropes like, money can't buy happiness and more money, more problems. It was exactly the message the world was eager to embrace. The only issue? The public entirely misunderstood the data.
Actually, the very first clue for anyone misquoting this study is sitting right there in the title of the paper itself. High income improves evaluation of life, but not emotional well-being. Okay, so what does that actually mean in plain English? Basically, it means people with higher incomes don't necessarily experience higher levels of day-to-day happiness. They aren't waking up feeling completely giddy every single morning. But, and this is a big but, long-term, they generally have a much more positive overall outlook on their lives. Think of it like this. You might still get a flat tire and have a genuinely terrible Tuesday, but while you wait for the tow truck, you feel totally secure about your financial future. So money might not give you a daily emotional spike, but it absolutely profoundly improves your big picture evaluation of your life.
All right, moving into section 1, the hedonic treadmill and human psychology.
To really grasp why our day-to-day happiness seems to hit a ceiling, even as our bank accounts grow, we actually need to step away from the money itself for a second. The crucial point here is understanding something called the hedonic treadmill. This is the observed tendency of humans to just quickly revert back to a relatively stable baseline of happiness, pretty much regardless of what happens to us. Human nature literally causes us to normalize our situations. The things that once absolutely thrilled us, they eventually just become our new normal. It's not about being entitled or ungrateful, it's literally just how our brains are wired to adapt.
Think about winning the lottery, for example. Initially, you would absolutely lose your mind with joy, right? It's a massive, life-altering spike. But as time passes and you've swiped your shiny new card for the 100th time, the novelty wears off. That extravagant lifestyle just becomes Tuesday. And the exact same effect happens in reverse. If you got fired tomorrow, you'd experience a massive drop in happiness. But after the initial shock, you'd find a new job, adjust, and eventually return to your baseline emotional state. This treadmill effect is exactly why day-to-day joy doesn't endlessly skyrocket right alongside your income.
Section 2. Flaws in the data and misinterpreted stats. Let's address the elephant in the room regarding that initial study. So, Kahneman and Deaton surveyed a massive 709,000 households. These people answered questions about their income and happiness, producing a score on what's called the Cantrell ladder. If you aren't familiar, just picture a ladder where the bottom rung is the worst possible life you could have, and the top rung is your best possible life. You just rank where you currently stand. Well, the data revealed a really fascinating contradiction. The US ranked 9th out of 151 countries overall. We were doing incredibly well with day-to-day indicators like smiling and laughing. But at the exact same time, the US ranked 5th highest in the world for long-term stress. Wow. So Americans were smiling today but deeply stressed about tomorrow. That $75,000 mark? It was simply the generally accepted point where day-to-day survival stopped being a struggle, even though those long-term stressors, like massive debt or housing costs, remained very real.
The crazy thing is, the public completely ignored the massive uncontrolled variables in this data. A flat $75,000 rule assumes all households function exactly the same way. But come on, a young single professional with zero debt might feel like absolute royalty on $75K, while a family of 5 paying a mortgage in Los Angeles would find it entirely inadequate just to keep the lights on. Plus, there's inflation. $75,000 from over a decade ago is much closer to $90,000 today. And honestly, maybe the biggest flaw of the whole shebang, this data was collected during the 2008 global financial crisis. People were living through massive layoffs and foreclosures. Lower-income households were naturally experiencing wildly different day-to-day stressors than middle-class families who were suddenly watching their accumulated wealth vanish overnight.
Now, the whole reason we're tearing this myth down today is because believing in this magical cutoff actually does a lot of harm. A more recent study on this exact issue found a really strange anomaly. They found a significant dip in happiness among households that had just crossed that $75,000 threshold. Why? Because they were sold a false peak. People thought they had finally made it to peak happiness, only to realize the finish line was a total illusion. This led to massive disappointment when their daily lives didn't, just magically become perfect.
Which naturally leads us right into Section 3, diminishing returns and maximizing happiness. If $75,000 isn't the magical limit, how much do you actually need?
Well, the answer is simple, and honestly, it's a little unsatisfying. The answer is literally just more. Modern findings from similar studies have found that overall happiness increases with income and negative emotions fall, without any perceivable plateau at any particular income level. The upward trend just keeps going. However, there is a very specific mathematical catch to how this actually plays out in reality.
This is where the math gets super fascinating. The relationship between money and happiness is logarithmic, which means you experience diminishing returns on every single additional dollar. Look at it this way. If you make $25,000 a year and you suddenly get a $25,000 raise, your happiness metrics might shoot up by 50%. It's literally life-changing. It completely changes where you live and what you eat. But if you make $250,000 a year and get that exact same $25,000 raise, the impact is totally minimal. To get that same huge surge of joy, the person making $250K would need a massive $250,000 raise. Happiness builds with proportional increases, not just nominal ones.
And this reveals a genuinely incredible insight into human motivation. People are actually most satisfied if they're receiving consistent, predictable increases in their income over time. Just think about your own workplace. The feeling of getting a steady $5,000 bonus year after year feels amazing. It's actually far more mentally satisfying than getting one massive promotion and then being completely ignored by your boss for a decade. A constant upward trajectory, whether that's from steady pay raises, promotions, or just business growth, is vastly more satisfying than a massive income that sits entirely stagnant. Our brains crave progress. A constant supply of small rewards keeps those happy brain juices flowing, for sure.
All right, Section 4, more than just money. Let's look at the bigger picture. See, when researchers analyze data, they don't just look for a connection. They look at how much of the outcome is actually explained by that connection. The original researchers found that the relationship between income and happiness accounts for about 37% of the expected variance. Now, don't get me wrong, 37% is a massive slice of the pie for just one single variable, but it still leaves a whopping 63% of your happiness determined by factors that have absolutely nothing to do with your bank account.
That remaining 63%, that's the rest of your life. It's your physical and mental health. It's having meaningful relationships with your family and friends. It's spirituality, personal purpose, and having a healthy work-life balance, which, ironically enough, often has a negative relationship with ultra-high incomes. The major upshot here is that someone on a modest income can absolutely be far happier than a wealthy person who is chronically stressed, completely lonely, unhealthy, and entirely consumed by a job they can't step away from. Money is a tool. It's a very powerful 37% of the equation, absolutely, but it just isn't everything.
So, we have officially dismantled the $75,000 myth. We know that money scales logarithmically with happiness, meaning you need bigger proportional leaps to feel that same joy as you get wealthier, and we know it still only makes up about a third of the total happiness pie. So, it's time to stop chasing a mythical $75,000 finish line. Instead, ask yourself this: what does your 63% actually look like? And exactly how much money do you need to fuel it?